on Prime Crime.
When I got the call that Karl passed away, my instinctive thought was, it's got to be her.
A savage murder.
It was just shock and dismay. We couldn't believe what was going on.
An elusive killer.
I find her to be incredibly manipulative.
And a call for justice.
And you put the gun 12 to 24 inches from his head and pulled the trigger, correct?
Hey there everybody, I'm Jesse Weber and welcome to Prime Crime. This is where we do a deeper dive into the most high-profile and memorable true crime cases. Now this story is about how authorities were trying to catch a killer for years, and when they finally did, you're never going to believe what they heard. March 12, 2007 may have been a normal day for many people, but for the family of Air Force Major Karl Hoerig, this was the start of a nightmare. After Hoerig didn't report to work, law enforcement go to his home in Newton Falls, Ohio, and discover his dead body.
It was just shock and dismay. We couldn't believe what was going on.
Authorities would conclude that Karl had been shot 3 times, his body found at the bottom of a stairwell and covered with a tarp. But there was something missing from the house, or rather, someone.
And she wasn't around. It was very easy to put 2 and 2 together. It was very obvious what happened.
Claudia Hoerig, Karl's wife, was nowhere to be found. Investigators would soon find out that their main suspect was not only no longer in Ohio, she wasn't even in the U.S. Instead, she had left for her native country of Brazil days earlier.
When I got the call that Karl passed away, my instinctive thought was, it's got to be her.
While some who knew the couple sensed something might be off, Karl's friend Krista Bridges would tell authorities an eerie story about Claudia. The year prior to Karl's death, Bridges said Claudia made this comment about Karl at a bachelorette party.
I was eating, and then Claudia just leaned over and said, if he ever left me, I'd kill him.
Authorities learned that Claudia had purchased a gun days before the shooting, took out money from the bank, and made a quick getaway. But with Claudia now in Brazil, authorities and Hoerig's loved ones faced a major legal obstacle.
Brazil does not normally extradite to the U.S. for their own citizens. She was, in fact, born in Brazil.
This was a very difficult process from the beginning. They were not going to extradite Claudia Hoerig, and that's when we started talking with the local congressman. Tim Ryan did a really good job of creating publicity around this case. And then when I started the Facebook page, Justice for Karl Hoerig, I had an international audience, and many people from Brazil supported our efforts.
The fight by politicians, lawyers, and Karl's supporters to get Claudia back to the States would last over 10 years. But then, a breakthrough. The Brazilian government revokes Claudia's citizenship in 2013, and in 2018, she's officially extradited back to America.
Interestingly, she had relinquished her Brazilian citizenship in exchange for an American citizenship.
It was touch and go all along. I was ecstatic. Now we finally had a chance to present the case.
When Hoerig is finally arrested, this is where things take a different turn.
So you're willing to talk us without a lawyer? And you're sure of that? Because it has nothing to hide.
I believe that Claudia thought that she could outsmart everyone. She obviously had a lot of time to think through her answers to almost every single question. The one thing she didn't lack was answers.
Hoerig begins by explaining how she met Karl online and they married in 2005. But this relationship, at least according to her, was very strange.
He went on a crazy lifestyle of doing all kinds of perverted stuff, men, women, everything. He forced me to play dead. He would only have an orgasm if I played dead.
Hoerig said the behavior got worse.
He had boxed with things that he tortured me with. Ropes, the whip, and he made me walk around naked in the house on
I thought that that description was problematic. It was when people are telling lies that they go a few steps too far, and she really laid it on heavy with kink shaming, essentially. I think, number one, to engender sympathy, and number two, to smear him, to make him look like he deserved it and that she was being abused.
Hoerig even blamed Karl's alleged mistreatment for multiple miscarriages.
And I got sick. After a few days, my body just couldn't take it anymore.
In terms of blaming him for the miscarriages, that also is bizarre. As far as I know, there is no medical proof of that.
2006, I got pregnant again. And again, he did the same thing to me, the same torture.
It would be totally uncharacteristic for those kinds of things. Those things, if valid, should have been brought up ahead of time.
Hoerig explained that her situation became so dire, particularly when she became pregnant for a third time, that she eventually decided to commit suicide.
I'm not going to have an abortion. There's nothing that's going to make me have an abortion. And he doesn't want the child. What am I going to do? Kill myself.
When you look at some of the behaviors that she's exhibited in, you do see especially some traits of borderline personality disorder. A lot of suicidal gestures, a lot of threats for suicide attempts. This is all really consistent with what we're seeing with her.
Coming up next, was suicide really Claudia's plan, or rather, murder?
My plan was never, not for one single minute, to kill anybody. I swear to God, there was not for a single minute I thought about it. That shows his character, all the things that he did to me, how he screamed at me, how he cursed at me, how he abused me.
After an over 10-year legal and political battle, in 2018, Claudia Hoerig is extradited from Brazil back to the United States for the murder of her husband, Karl Hoerig, who was found shot to death in his home back in 2007. However, when Claudia decides to speak with investigators on her return to America, she accuses Karl of physically and emotionally abusing her, which led her to want to commit suicide. But listen carefully to her plan.
The best way of committing suicide was with the gun. But the downside of killing yourself with a gun is that it has a recoil. That most people that try to kill themselves, they lose part of their face, but they don't die.
Yet Hoerig apparently had a solution.
What I do, I went to the gun store. I asked for a gun that was small enough for my hands. I went to firing range, right?
So the research of it, I mean, obviously.
A lot.
Not only that, but Hoerig also allegedly built a homemade contraption to shoot herself.
That hole should be right here.
I do not believe that her plan was to kill herself. She purchased a weapon that had laser sights, and then she went and practiced it, afraid of some phantom recoil. And then she also built a box that she could steady the barrel of the gun in order to shoot more accurately. That is not something that you typically or ever see in the case of suicide.
Battered wife syndrome is really just kind of a subset of PTSD. A person believes that they are in extreme danger and can't leave. That's really not been the case in this relationship. There were plenty of times where she was left alone, where she had opportunities to leave, and that just didn't happen.
Let's move to the day of the shooting. Claudia claims she was pregnant for a third time and got into a heated argument with Karl over whether to have the child. At one point, he decides to take a shower, and that's when she decides to act.
I did something very shocking for him to shake him up. So when he opened the door and see me with the gun, he saw me with the gun to my head, he would have no reaction. He would keep staring at me. He said, that's a very good idea. Go to the basement to do that, because you're going to splash my paintings. You're going to splash blood all over my paintings. And I got very angry. If he hadn't said that, I would be dead, he would be alive.
What happened next?
Well, what happened next is that I got very angry and I got up real fast and I shot.
I don't think that this is a snap. I think that that had been carefully contrived over years of planning to explain away what otherwise looks like a cold, premeditated murder.
The act of shooting somebody, the act of killing somebody, takes a lot of steps and it takes a lot of desensitization. That is not normal for most people. I don't think she snapped.
It's what Claudia did after the shooting, though, that really cast doubt on this attempted suicide, unintentional killing theory. First, she said she wanted to shoot herself, but didn't realize she didn't have any bullets left.
I pulled the trigger, nothing happened. I said, my bullets. What happened?
Then she calls her family, who convinces her to escape.
And they said that Ohio had death penalty.
She goes to the bank to drain out an account.
I have $1,300 in the bank account. If I clean it up, they will know that I killed my husband. I was paranoid. So I only got $1,000 and left $300 in the bank account.
And before she leaves, she decides to cover up Karl's body.
I want to have time to write. So I put a cover over him and a letter. In case somebody came to the window, they would not see his body. So I would have time to take him in.
To get out of the country.
To get out of the country.
All this was done in very quick succession after the shooting, which leads you to believe that she was fleeing, and fleeing can be used as a fact to evidence guilt. If you are someone who behaved in a rage and you felt contrition and it was a big mistake that was predicated upon years of abuse, which is her claim, you wouldn't necessarily run.
I find her to be incredibly manipulative. I think this is what she does, is she likes to take control of situations, and she's hopeful that with her charm and her being playful that she may be able to get out of this.
Okay. I'm already dead inside.
It's one thing for law enforcement to not believe that Claudia was an abused woman who snapped, but what about a jury?
I did this. I killed Karl, and I'm about to kill myself.
Stay with us.
Do you know where that first shot hit you?
No, I actually, I was just shooting.
After her extradition back to the United States, Claudia Hoerig is arrested and charged with the murder of her husband, Air Force Major Karl Hoerig. During her 2019 trial, the prosecution attempted to show that she planned to shoot and kill her husband, while her defense team argued this was a spontaneous act fueled by years of alleged abuse and Karl's indifference towards his wife's life.
And she shot him because at her moment of weakness, 30 days after she's attempted suicide, when she wants to have a conversation with him, he tells her, go ahead, kill yourself.
Moment of weakness is just, it is a term of art, but it's something that is basically a heat of passion defense, that you are so enraged that in that moment of weakened state, you act out upon those feelings. That is theoretically possible from the statement that she claims her husband made.
Well, there was no one better than Claudia herself to tell her side of the story.
Did you plan to kill Karl Hoerig?
Never for a second.
Yet it was when the prosecution cross-examined Hoerig that the fireworks really began.
Before you shot Karl Hoerig, you were upset that he had an engagement party for you at Put-in-Bay, correct?
I thought that was very weird. That was a sign that something
Yes or
was
no?
wrong.
I'm not asking for an explanation. All I want to know is yes or no. Before you shot him, you were upset that he had an engagement party for you at Put-in-Bay. Before you shot him, were you upset that he picked out the clothes you wore?
I didn't realize at the time that.
Yes or
I was
no?
being-
All I want to know is yes or no.
What's your? I not understand the question.
We're getting to the
You
point.
asking me
Can
if
you
I was-
answer the questions and not argue with me, please? Karl Hoerig cannot come in here and explain any of these situations that you testified to, correct?
Yes, he can through the voice
No,
recordings.
no, he can't. Can Karl Hoerig come in this courtroom and testify?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Her behavior on the stand is in complete contrast to her behavior during her interrogation. It's almost like she realizes that she's got caught and she's lost the power, and now she's angry.
Like you said,
Yeah, men and women, they can flirt, but I never had anything with him, and I have no reason to hide that.
So he indicated to you.
Is that a crime?
I asked the questions here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
One way the prosecution tried to show this was a murder was the actual gunshot wounds themselves.
You shot and killed Karl Hoerig by putting not one, not two, but 3 shots into his body, correct?
Yes.
All right. And you put the gun 12 to 24 inches from his head and pulled the trigger, correct?
Probably.
Probably? Well, did somebody else break into the house and shoot him too?
Even the crime scene, the prosecution used to show proof of prior calculation and design, because according to her, she had shot him one time and believed that he was dead upon that first shot. But evidence shows, and she did admit, that she later shot at him at close range additionally and made sure essentially that he was dead.
We, the jury, in this case, duly impaneled and sworn or affirmed, find the defendant, Claudia C. Hoerig, guilty of aggravated murder as she stands charged in the first count of the indictment.
I was pleased with the guilty verdict because I think it was the right decision. All of her planning and preparation was for naught, essentially. They realized that she was not telling the truth.
We completed the mission, and we got justice for Karl, for his family, for his friends, for all of the people that knew and loved him.
You may think Claudia Hoerig will never step out of prison for the rest of her life, but is that actually the case? More when we return.
Before you shot him, were you upset that you had had these miscarriages?
I'm not understanding your question.
Okay, let's move on.
Before when? 5 minutes,
Listen.
one day? I'm not understanding the question.
Claudia Hoerig, the woman who executed her husband Karl Hoerig in cold blood and then fled the country for over 10 years, was finally arrested, charged, and convicted of murder. At her sentencing, we heard the moving victim impact statements from Karl's family.
I want to list every moment that it has hurt me that Dad's gone. I want to talk about my beautiful kids he never met. I want to talk about grief and missed opportunities, but I would never be able to stop.
The loss of my brother is beyond words. The fact Claudia so arrogantly fled to a foreign country after killing my brother has been both heartbreaking and frustrating. Knowing Claudia selfishly went on with a normal life, starting a business, and getting remarried as if nothing had happened is difficult for me to comprehend.
People that have the ability to essentially live double lives or commit an act like this and then move on to something means that they're really good at compartmentalizing. So this is something that you'll see, in these cold-hearted psychopaths, but it's also a trait that's pretty characteristic in a lot of personality disorders.
We are here today for the long-awaited culmination of the worst possible circumstances contemplated in our criminal system.
Judge Logan sentenced the then 54-year-old to life in prison, but with the possibility of parole after 28 years. As part of the extradition agreement between the United States and Brazil, Hoerig couldn't be sentenced to death, nor a term of imprisonment of over 30 years.
I think that deal would never have been stricken unless it was absolutely mandatory, and it was here. I don't think that the U.S. would ever have their hands on her if they hadn't made that deal. And of course, they will honor that deal. I don't think that she will ever be obviously considered for parole until those 28 years are up. But even then, parole can be denied indefinitely. So it'll be interesting to see how the parole board revisits this issue in 28 years.
As for Hoerig, the woman who said she didn't care what happened to her, her actions would say otherwise. In a legal letter after the trial, she complains that she's a victim of gross misconduct and blames everyone for her current predicament, including the government and her own trial attorney.
What it seems like is she's adopted this victim mentality, hoping that others will believe her to either gain sympathy or assuage her guilt.
She also hasn't fared too well legally. Her appeal has since been denied and conviction upheld.
The Court of Appeals found that there was sufficient evidence to show prior calculation and design. And essentially, they were able to show that the jury's verdict was based upon sound evidence.
In the end, it was the memory of Karl Hoerig that led to the eventual capture of his killer, and it's that memory that will live on in those who knew him.
He was a good friend. I really enjoyed flying with him. He was a great guy, a great pilot. He was a flight instructor, and he was just a joy to be around. It is truly a tragedy that we had to lose him at such a young age. And Karl was one of the best. He truly was.
Claudia Hoerig is just one of those defendants that gives you the chills. And I gotta tell you, when she said she was dead inside, she might be right. That's all we have for you here on Prime Crime. Leave us your comments on Instagram and Twitter with the hashtag PrimeCrime. As always, thank you for joining us, and until next time, be safe. On Prime Crime.
How do you pick the ones that you think you're going to kill?
Depends on how net.
The story of one of America's most infamous murderers.
Because he did this same MO over and over again, he got very good at it.
His own words on the killings.
Did you have any conversation with her?
My mind was on killing her.
And hear from the people who sat across from evil.
I'll never in my life ever interview another killer like that in my career.
Pluck me another grape. How many grapes? Y'all got on the vine here.
Hey there, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and welcome to Prime Crime. This is where we do a deeper dive into the most high-profile and memorable true crime cases. Our next story is about a killer so renowned, we had to dedicate 2 shows to this case. Here is part 1. In 1970, a woman is strangled to death and buried in a shallow grave out in Florida. From there, for the next 35 years, bodies would be found across different states. No connection, no prime suspect. It would take decades before these cases would be solved and finally connected to one man.
She was pretty, a light-skinned, brown, honey-colored skin.
This is Samuel Little, also known as Samuel McDowell.
I met her in a nightclub in New Orleans. So I took off the exit, went, and that sure enough was the road leading into the woods. And we went in and parked.
He may not look like much when investigators began interviewing him in 2018, in his late 70s and suffering from health conditions. But the man you're seeing was the most prolific serial killer in United States history.
I grabbed her by the legs and pulled her to the water. That's the only one that I ever killed by drowning.
That's just one confession of many that Little provided to authorities after his capture at the then age of 71.
I'll never in my life ever interview another killer like that in my career. You know, you first see him, he's this little old man in a wheelchair that will remind me of a little old man on a porch, rocking in a chair, telling you his stories about his life, although his stories were demented.
North Little Rock. Tell me what that girl looked like.
Oh man, I loved her. She was a heavy set, big old yellow hair, and had buck teeth. It had a gap between the teeth, that's what it was. She's too big for me to carry her, so I just pulled her out of the car and laid on that trash that was lit there.
There was no remorse whatsoever. It was a matter of fact. I got him to kill. He went into great detail in his crimes.
Oh, the only thing I know in all is that I killed him.
And that was your intent?
That was my intent.
Sam Little ultimately confessed to 93 murders from 1970 to 2005. That's more than Ted Bundy, the Zodiac Killer, and the Golden State Killer combined.
We know of at least 93 women who were murdered. He was not going to stop. He actually told police that he found it sexually satisfying to rape and kill women.
In order to really understand Sam Little's reign of terror, let's first dig into the killings themselves. Like many serial killers, Sam Little had an MO.
Did you ever shoot any of these girls?
Shoot?
Yeah, with a gun?
I don't get no kicks out of shooting.
All right. So everything was done by manual strangulation. Did you ever use like a belt or a cloth or
No
anything?
garrots and all that, no.
No ligatures at all?
My hands.
Just your hands?
And without that, I wouldn't want to do it.
He would take his hands and he would put them on their throats and he would choke them, and sometimes he would allow them to revive so he could see the fear in their eyes before choking them out finally.
I was squeezing hard enough for the breath could be cut off, and sooner or later she gonna start wanting to catch a breath, and that's when she tried to pull my hands off. It was too late then.
Was it exciting to you at the time?
Yes, it was.
He's a sadistic killer for sure. He wanted to feel like their neck swallowing. And I think his foreplay, basically, he would take a lot of them to eat, and they would go eat and swallow and drink. And I think that was his foreplay. That's what got him excited, was watching that neck.
So how was it that Little was able to commit dozens of rapes and murders without getting caught?
The reason Sam Little went undetected for so many years is because of who he targeted, primarily drug-addicted women and sex workers.
They didn't know who the hell was doing it.
Yeah.
I don't go back to the same city sometimes and pluck me another grape. I said, how many grapes? So y'all got on to find him.
Sure.
That one right there.
There's a good one, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So basically, these were women nobody would miss.
He knew which women would be not cared about. He knew which women would not be missed. He knew which women would be susceptible to his advances, either whether they're romantic or he was providing them drugs or providing them alcohol.
She was a hoe, yeah. She's a hoe. She was trying to make some money now.
He knew which women on the lower levels of our society he could actually lure into his car, to take to a secluded place, to quickly kill them in the dead of night where nobody could see them, and then to dump their body immediately and get out of Dodge. This is how he got away with it. And I'm not just saying, he says it.
Long as you didn't get in out there with the people that would be immediately missed,
yeah,
and very important to either family or business or somebody.
Yeah, you got pretty good at knowing which ones.
Well, I'm not going to go over in the white neighborhood and pick out the little young teenage girl or like the idiots do. You know?
And that's how Little got away with it, over and over again. And because he did this secret, because he did this same MO over and over again, he got very good at it.
Coming up, Little had spent his life in and out of prison and had almost been captured before. So what happened?
I've been lucky on numerous times.
Yeah.
I wanted to be in the back somewhere concealed.
So she was already dead in the car?
Yeah.
Okay.
After Samuel Little is arrested in 2012 on a narcotics charge, investigators realize he's actually responsible for several cold case killings. Little would ultimately confess to 93 murders. Prior to his capture, though, Little was a man who had been arrested almost 100 times and only spent a total of 10 years behind bars. So how was he not connected to these crimes sooner? And more importantly, how was he still on the streets for all this time?
I was lucky in Florida. I had a dead body in the car. Got to get the choked out. Yes, and I'm getting ready. But boom, 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 blue lights everywhere. Police car and come back behind the building. He seen us parked there. I jumped out the car and tried to act like I'm zipping my pants. He said, oh, what the fuck? What's going on over here? I said, nothing. I said, me and my wife just coming in the course. Put your damn car, looked in that window with a flashlight, I'm telling you. Shining right on the girl. She lay up there like that.
And she's dead.
Dead.
Yeah.
And as soon as he was looking in there, I said, yeah, right here. I got his mind off of it. Just the nigga time before he took a second look. And I got away like that. He said, well, you got to get out of him. Wow. I got in the car and took off.
The police weren't able to put together a strong case against him because he himself knew how to get away without leaving a lot of evidence.
I never cut, stabbed, burnt, bit. No, none of that. No blood. I don't like blood.
He would initially strike his victims in the head and then strangle them. And I think ultimately, when you think about this, you're not going to have any forensic evidence later. The bodies have deteriorated, so there were no markings, you couldn't see knife wounds to bones, you could not see gunshot bullets, there was no fractures in these bodies.
I found about a pig farm or something. Wow. And that's how they found the girl that laying in the field next to the pig farm. All the mother skin ate off of face. The rats got over.
Sam Little would dispose of bodies in the Everglades, he would roll them down hills, he would put them in densely forested areas.
She was like partially concealed by the vegetation, left for there.
DNA didn't really start being utilized until the mid-1990s. So he was able to get away with any type of sexual crimes.
Alabama did the same thing. I had this black chick up in the car, and I just got through killing her. This mother pulled up with the sheriff pulled up.
Nobody ran the plate or anything like that.
No.
So they didn't put that on.
He didn't run the plate. Nobody. No, he wasn't looking for no. They found the body, man, about a month later.
Even though he had 100 arrests and served only 10 years prison time, I would blame partially the criminal justice system because a lot of the cases against him were dismissed, they weren't followed up with, and he was fleeing constantly. He was very transient and leaving to different areas, cities across the nation.
Little had had close calls before, but nothing may have come as close as to when he was directly tied to two brutal murders.
You know, we caught him. We believed he was responsible for Melinda Lupre's murder in 1982. And we know absolutely he was responsible for Patricia Mount's case.
Now, when you're driving around with Patricia Mount in the front passenger seat, did you have any conversation with her?
My mind was on killing her. She let me feel her throat. I was caressing it. And before I knew it, I tied my hands around it and strangled her to death.
After Patricia Mount's nude body was found in that hayfield, hair fibers and witness testimony linked Little to the killing, and he went on trial. Yet once again, it was Little's lucky day. The jury found him not guilty. As for Melinda Lupree, a grand jury opted not to indict him.
Other media has come to us saying, you know, if y'all had just tried him and he was in jail, all these people would be alive. And I will tell you that Melinda Lupree had been out in the elements for over 3 weeks. And if you saw a picture of her remains, you would understand there were no evidence there to gain. There were so many things, so many times that he was arrested for assaulting women, and the women were ladies of the night. They were on drugs. And those don't make the best witnesses, unfortunately.
A combination of lack of hard evidence, issues with witnesses, and Little's own ways of covering up his crimes resulted in weak cases and him continually striking plea deals for shorter prison stints. Jillian Lauren, a New York Times bestselling author and someone who spent hours interviewing Sam Little, has made it her mission to be the voice of these victims.
Because of the fact that they were often prostitutes, often drug addicts, often women of color, women who were considered unimportant, or as some cops used to talk about, the women who were turning up in South Central dead almost every morning in the 80s. NHI, no humans involved. But, you know, it wasn't just cops. He was tried by a jury of his peers. Once again, it's us who let him go.
Up next, Little's crime spree comes to an end, but his story is just beginning.
I had desire, strong desire, to her and kill her.
And she played with you a little bit on the way out there, and you killed her in the car.
Yes, I was tried for it.
You beat it, too.
Samuel Little, who's come to be known as the most prolific serial killer in United States history, and whose crime spree spanned from 1970 to 2005, was able to elude justice for years. That is, until 2012.
The prosecutors and the police were never able to actually pin a case on him until he left his DNA.
California actually had a case where they had run DNA on a cold case, and they had an identical case, or one that was a similar MO. And when they tested that DNA, the DNA came back to an identical person in Sam Little.
In September 2012, Little was arrested in a homeless shelter in Kentucky on an outstanding California drug charge. When he was extradited back to LA, investigators such as Detective Mitzi Roberts were able to link Little's DNA to material left at crime scenes in the 1980s.
I was already putting together a Sam Little case because I was working all the cold cases here in my area in Mississippi. Los Angeles, Mitzi Roberts called asking, do we have anything about a Sam Little case? So she came down, interviewed our witnesses to put together a method, an MO of the killer Sam Little. It fit everything with their cases.
In 2014, Little was convicted of the murders of 3 of his victims, Carol Alford, Audrey Nelson, and Guadalupe Apodaca. But in a way, Little was also answering for all the women he had killed.
They were human beings in that they were all totally different. They're you.
In September 2014, Little was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms in prison without the possibility of parole. While Little had maintained his innocence his whole life, in 2018, he finally decided to open up to investigators.
What's up, man?
It's so good to meet you, and I'd like to personally thank you for being generous enough with your time.
I hope I can clear up some of it.
When somebody is incarcerated and they know they're spending their life in jail, their communication with the outside world is, in essence, gone.
You're so valuable to society at this point, I think.
I'm worth something to these people. I thought I was a worthless thing to them. People saying that I'm worth something.
He opened up because it was his exit strategy. This was, again, part of his overall plan. This guy definitely was ready to talk as soon as he knew that he wasn't going to be receiving the death penalty.
That's the letter that you requested, that our state attorney will not pursue the death penalty under any circumstances.
Now the question became, how do you get Little to open up?
I'd love to talk to you about Gainesville a little bit. You know, that's where I live and work.
I'm not a Gator fan, I'll tell you right now.
You must be Ohio State,
right?
You know what Urban did for our Gators, though.
Big Ohio State, my guy. Yeah.
Now, you were a USC fan, too? Or?
No. I can't stand California fans.
But you lived out in California for a while.
I've lived there several times.
Going to be Little's interview, for sure. Wanted to make sure that myself, as a prosecutor, was going to be somebody that he wouldn't mind talking to. We knew that he liked the Cleveland Browns. He's from the Cleveland area. We're from the Cleveland. And so that kind of was our cash, if you will, to be able to build this rapport with him.
What do you remember about it?
Talking shit.
Talking.
How I did it? I talked to him straight. I told him he was a big perv. And I told him I didn't agree with him. He would say, "What do you call me, a perverted homicidal maniac?" And I said, "Well, that's like certainly one of the things I'd call you." And he was just like, "Whatever, you're a hoe." I was mostly kind of honest with him.
Coming up, Little may have confessed to numerous murders, but how do we know if he was telling the truth? More when we return.
The only that I did was one was strangled. Some lived and some didn't.
After serial killer Samuel Little was finally caught in 2012 and convicted of murdering 3 women back in the 1980s, he decided to confess to more of his crimes from 1970 to 2005. And that's when the floodgates opened.
So I killed a girl there.
In Ocala?
Gangster. I killed a girl over there in Ocala too.
She also talked about a young lady that you dumped down a stairwell.
Yeah, white girl.
That was a white girl?
Yeah, she was white. I got her out of the car, pulled her out, and drug her into the ropes back there.
Little ended up confessing to killing 93 people and would ultimately plead guilty to several more murders. How do we know, though, that Little was actually telling the truth?
I absolutely believe in his credibility of the stories that he told. He knew everything about my crime in 1982, and then the 1977 remains actually had a wig on. Nobody knew that but the anthropologist and us. And he talks about she had a wig and he threw it out the window after he killed our very first victim. In one other case, he was able to tell what the last item that a lady had eaten was basically the carrots out of a salad and brown coffee. And the autopsy report shows undigested carrots and brown coffee. And that also was from the 70s.
But it would have been dark for you, so I don't know how these pictures can really help you.
No, that must be the blanket.
Yes.
That's the blanket.
How did you remember that?
It was also important what Little said he didn't do.
We were all sitting around talking, and the detective says, yeah, you know, he killed mine. He drew a picture over, and I said, what year was yours? And he said, 1998. I said, no, it wasn't Sam Little. I said, he was not out in 1998. So when they go into the interview room, and this detective is starting to talk to him about that case, and I'm thinking, golly, if Sam Little confesses to killing this one, that's going to throw this whole story in the brink. I mean, it just, none of it's going to be true. And, you know, he looked at it, oh yeah, I'm never hung, yeah. But I didn't kill that one. He said, I was going to kill her. He said, I came back to kill her, but she was gone. I couldn't find her. Then I said, when Sam could have took credit for one, did not. And so they told me he's not out there just trying to get numbers. He's out there wanting to talk about his cases.
Now we get a sense of his killings, but what drove Sam Little?
Did choking with these women happen before the sex, or during, or right afterwards? When did it mostly happen?
I choose her out first.
You pick the ones that you think you're going to kill first?
No. If the one depends on how I'm neck.
So clearly a lot more to talk about. And in part 2 of our Sam Little story, we're going to get into his background in psychology, why he stopped killing, and also whether Little is responsible for more murders than we know about. So that's all we have for you right now on Prime Crime, but leave us your comments on Instagram and Twitter with the hashtag PrimeCrime. As always, thank you for joining us, and until next time, be safe.